Andrew, thank you for joining us on Behind the Christmas Hits and happy anniversary.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for the congratulations as well. Yes, 40. Well, I mean, I don't really have much to do with the anniversaries. They seem to come round as a matter of course, but I have
Fair
yet
enough.
on time itself. But working on it, working on it.
I appreciate it. Get back to us as soon as you get that figured out. One of the things that I love about doing this show is looking back at the original context in which some of these Christmas classics were released. And for Wham's Last Christmas, it was released on December 3rd, 1984. Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, which was Wham's first big North American hit, that was number one on the Billboard Hot 100 up until December 1st. Like 2 days earlier, you were still riding high. I mean, in many respects, and I know the timeline was a little different in terms of chart success in the UK, but in terms of North America, Last Christmas was really Wham's second big hit.
I didn't know that insofar as I didn't know that. um, yeah, that's quite something. I don't recall where Last Christmas to what number, where it reached in the charts that year. I would imagine it did fairly well. As you say, Wake Me Up was an ever present. It had been. I think Wake Me Up was. I don't know when it was released in the States. Actually, was it May or June or a bit later? I don't know.
I think you're right. I think it was like late spring, early summer, maybe at the latest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so that is something that's live and learn.
I just think a lot of people either forget, and it sounds like yourself fall into this category. You just didn't know, just in terms of how early in the band's career, at least in terms of North American success, it came. When the
Yeah, I
song was
mean,
written, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, sure, you're right. I mean, we'd had the States was one of our earliest foreign visits. In actual fact, in '83, we appeared on the Dick Clark show, and we performed a couple of numbers then. But it was some time before I think we had major success. I don't know where Fantastic came, where it reached on the charts, but you're right. With regard to the general sort of perception of Wham as being a big act, it was 1984. So
Early on.
yeah.
You were at George's parents' house when George wrote the song. I think you were watching a soccer match or something like that, and then he left the room and started writing. I can tell you that after profiling about 60 different Christmas songs for this podcast, this is the first one that was written during a soccer match. Was that just an example? Is that just an example that George was always thinking about music?
Yes, I think that's probably a fair observation. He did spend most of his time when not working or doing other things, but it was his main focus, and I think that's correct to say that. If he wasn't listening to music, he was writing it or performing. So yeah, it was all consuming, and it was that example is a perfect illustration of his absorption by music.
And why Christmas? Because as I understand it, he knew it was going to be a Christmas song from the go. It's not like it was a melody that was kicking around in his head for a few months and then it eventually became a Christmas song. Why Christmas that day, do you think, when you're watching soccer together?
He he would have wanted to have written a Christmas hit because it was an aspiration. It wasn't just an aspiration, but it was a fact in the UK growing up that the Christmas number one was a special type of record. Christmas records were the only example really of their genre. You didn't make an Easter record, you didn't make a Thanksgiving record or whatever. But you did make a Christmas record, and it was, as a songwriter, it was an exercise in songwriting, and it was our aspirations grew as the band's success grew, and I think that is a factor. But also, I would imagine that as it appeared in Yog's mind, it sounded Christmassy. You know, I mean, it's it very much he when songs were conceived, he had a mental image of it's the wrong word, but it had mental sound. Heard it as it was ultimately going to sound to everyone. That was one of the knacks that he had. So it would have been quite apparent to him that when that melody came to him, that it was, it had Christmas stamped all over it. I think he must have said as much himself, I'm sure.
You mentioned the prestige of having a Christmas #1 in the UK. I think we saw that story play out in the movie Love Actually. And it's just, I don't think that the same prestige comes with it in North America as it does in the UK. So it makes sense that if, as you're starting out and trying to establish a music career, you want to check and hit all of those milestones in terms of what is a successful artist. But I do think it's worth noting that your contemporaries at the time, Michael Jackson, Madonna, Duran Duran, Culture Club, they're not putting out original Christmas songs in 1984. This was a different time for Christmas music. You guys were very much doing your own thing.
Well, the Christmas release was an established um, um, principle, if you like, a factor. Slade had a big hit track in the mid-70s, as did Wizard. There are a number of other bands that preceded us that did. The Pretenders had a big hit with 2,000 Miles, which would have been late 70s, I imagine. So it was there. It's not an easy thing to do. I would imagine that for every successful Christmas song, there are dozens that don't make it and perhaps don't even get to the drawing board stage. So it's not an easy thing to do, except if you're George Michael.
Were you on board with it from the first time he played it for you? I think it was in his old childhood bedroom. He still had his keyboard, and you went up and gave it a listen. Were you on board from jump?
Yeah, I mean, we were still living at home at that time because unfortunately our record deal didn't convey the means by which to have our own abodes. So yeah, he had a 4-track, one of those very early home recording units, which was recorded on a cassette. I mean, it liberated music making for a whole generation. And so a lot of the a lot of ideas went down on that. To sort of slightly digress from the point that was being made, but which I think was why didn't anyone else have? I think it was, as I said, wasn't an easy thing to do, and but nevertheless, they came around. Of our contemporaries, not sure who else actually did make a Christmas track around that era, but you're probably better placed to tell me than I.
More started to do it in the years that followed as opposed to the years immediately preceding. 1984 was a big year. We're going to talk more about that in just a couple of moments, but I do want to talk about the music video for Last Christmas, which sounds the behind the scenes stories. I think you wrote about it in your book. It's covered in the Netflix documentary as well. The behind the scenes on the video sounds like a reality show before anybody had ever heard of that term. Reality show. It was set in a ski chalet. I'm sure you guys went up there all business, but things got pretty loose pretty fast on the set of that video, did it not?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a great deal of professionalism around Wham, to be honest with you. It was all quite a cottage industry, and I think that's part of its appeal. I think it was authentic. Not a great deal was conceived unnaturally, if you like. Let's take our dance routines for Young Guns, and they came from our club days. So things like that. I think it was, as I said, Wham was pretty authentic in how it presented itself and in the things that it did, if you like. And so the recording of the filming of the video was very much as it would have been had they were our friends with whom we shot the video. We socialized together. And it was very much had the sense and the feeling and of going away for a ski holiday together. So it had, I think the video conveys that. There's no acting in it. Um, um, so well, very little. And so it rings true.
It was the last time, little fun fact that I learned along the way, the last time George was seen on video without a beard, I believe was the video for Last Christmas.
Um,
Not
oh
that
yeah,
you have to respond or dispute that, but yeah, interesting that you're
yeah,
trying to kind of run through the sequence of events in your mind, hearing
yeah.
that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. You may well be right. I'm wondering whether when we toured the States in the late summer of '85, whether he was sporting the designer stubble. He may well have been. It may have been a feature from that point onwards.
The cameras were rolling for a lot of it. I'm sure there was tons of fun when the cameras weren't rolling. Needless to say, is it good that cell phones didn't exist in 1984 when you made the video for Last Christmas?
Um, I don't think there would have been anything that I would necessarily not have wanted to have been made. To
Okay,
be honest with you, it was all very sort of good natured
just good natured fun.
silliness. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
If
yeah.
Last Christmas is celebrating its 40th anniversary, that means another song is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year too. The song that kept Last Christmas out of that number one spot in the UK for that very first Christmas, and of course, talking about Band-Aids, Do They Know It's Christmas? And these two songs, I think, will always be connected, and I want to explore that in a moment. Um, the recording session for Band Aid, you were invited, but there was a bit of a communication snafu that happened there.
Yes. I think we had recently, it may even been the night before, flown back from shooting the video. I'm not entirely sure, but in those days of faxes and letters, I can't say that I read every letter or fax that crossed my path, and I missed that one. In short, so yeah, so I didn't actually attend the recording of the Band Aid record, but George, being rather more diligent in his approach to business in general, he did.
And he spoke about this in the Netflix documentary that the entire time he's in that recording session, he's thinking in the back of his mind, damn, this is really going to mess with our plans to have the number one Christmas song that year. Were you as competitive about chart position as George was?
No, I wasn't. It meant a lot more to George. That I mean, I felt they were always going to be hits. Um, I felt Wham Rap was going to be a hit when it reached 110 in the charts. So I wasn't always right, but for the most part, I was. I mean, I was obviously because it was a hit in the end.
Yeah.
But he was very very keen on getting the midweek chart placings. He followed it forensically, and yes, it meant a great deal. And we both felt that Last Christmas had Christmas number one stamped all over it, and we realised very quickly, he did, obviously, as you observed and commented on, that aspiration was going to be scuppered by Band Aid.
Well, and like so many other Christmas songs, I mean, yes, it did not hit number one that very first year, but you look at songs like Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You, or even going back further, Brenda Lee's Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. Uh, Last Christmas didn't just hang in there, it got more and more popular, finally hitting number one in 2023. What do you credit that to?
A lot of things, I think. I think it has. I think Christmas and the way that Christmas is promoted, TV, radio, commercially, retail, everything. the focus has become more intense, and I think that the Last Christmas, especially, I think has as has Mariah's track. I think it is, and I have this is a phrase that I will be repeating quite a bit. I think Last Christmas has woven itself into the fabric of Christmas. I think it is an essential piece of contemporary Christmas now for generations. And when I say generations, you know, my generation, generation prior, and the generation that precedes as well, or two. So great songs endure, and Christmas is the Christmas songs are given. I think rather more they're given their own space in whether it's video TV or whether it's radio, streaming. I think all those things. There's a broader, there's a far more a greater kind of panoply of media by which the person's senses are prevailed upon, shall we say?
As for a guy who, as you said, was almost forensic about studying the charts, George would have loved the idea of having a number one song 39 years after it first came out, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would. He would have enjoyed. I can't say he enjoyed the irony of it being a perennial number two, but yes, he would have been. He would have been thrilled to pieces that ultimately it did surmount the number one position. So it would have meant a great deal to him because you know, even though in everyone's minds it should have been it, you know, it's not the same as it was, and that would have been, yeah, he would have been dancing around the Christmas tree with that one, I think.
And here's you talk about how it's woven itself into the fabric of Christmas. I think this is a great example of that. It's become one of the most covered Christmas songs ever. I actually found a playlist online called 100 Versions Last Christmas Edition, literally
Homework,
100
Drew.
100 different versions of your song here, Andrew. Are there any others that you enjoy? Anybody else's version of Last Christmas that you enjoy?
The one that stands out for me is Gwen Stefani's version because I think it's a really clever rearrangement. It's done in a sort of, I don't know whether you know it, I'm sure you do. It sounds, it's got a real Phil Spector-ish sound to it, and time signatures slightly different, and it's really beautifully produced, and it has a unique character, um, which for me sets it apart from others. I don't know too many of them. I must try and find this 100 the playlist. Actually,
I'm not saying you'll recognize all the artists on it, but there are
no,
100
sure,
versions
yeah.
out there. Taylor Swift has done one. The Gwen Stefani, as you mentioned, there. Megan Trainor. There's all kinds that are out there. I do have a couple of Wham related, like not relating to Last Christmas, but general Wham questions that I wanted to talk to you about. You've mentioned how you'd be open to maybe doing like a Wham virtual reality show akin to what ABBA has done to huge success in the UK. Has there been any
Mm.
further discussions on that?
There haven't. The George Michael estate doesn't see things quite the same way as I do on that matter. So at the moment, that's a concept that hasn't been developed in any way. Personally, I think that format, that legacy type of legacy development is the way that legacy will go. And I personally absolutely loved the ABBA Voyage show, and it's difficult to convince yourself that it's not the real thing. And people, as whether it's cinema, whether it's theatre, they will suspend disbelief because they've signed up, you know, and it is fantastic, and it really genuinely is like watching, you know, the ABBA in the case of
Mhm.
Voyage, and it will be in the case of the various other acts that are considering that type of development, and of which I would wager there are several, and they'll be brilliant. It will be, if you want to go and see, God willing, Led Zepp or Elvis or you name it, to have that opportunity, and the technology will only get better, and it will be an absolutely astounding experience for virtually any act. I think in that context, it may even supplant live work for living artists.
Wow.
I mean, not wholly, but I think there are ways in which it may supplement and complement.
I'm an 80s kid. I remember when all of this music was new, but it really wasn't until the Netflix documentary that I really understood how Wham worked, and why it worked. How has it impacted you to have a fuller understanding of the group out there and for so many people to have watched it? I think we now have a better understanding of what Wham really was behind the scenes and how it got there.
Well, I think the fans of its music and Wham's fans and people who enjoyed Wham have always understood what Wham represented, even if perhaps it was less tangible. They hadn't quite been defined in their own minds. I think people instinctively recognized what it was. It my own point of view, the I was thrilled to pieces with the Netflix documentary. Chris Smith, I think, was the director, very clever and perceptive in the way it was presented, in the fact that he used just George's voice and my voice as the narration, and presented it in the context of a developing relationship, which it was. Our career as Wham was an extension of our journey into making music from a school band and before that. So it's authentic. It's an authentic account. It's genuine, and I think that's another reason why people enjoyed it so much. So in that sense, it's great that it stands as the definitive account of Wham, and I'm thoroughly pleased with that.
One of the questions that we ask people online: how do you feel about Christmas caroling? Options: A, I've never done it, but it's nice to hear. B, I love it and have done it numerous times. Or C, horrible, don't like it, never do it.
B.
You love it and have done it numerous times.
I absolutely adore Christmas carols. We used to sing them at school around the Christmas period. It was part of the assemblies that we'd have before the day started, and we caroled. George used to host a Christmas Eve party, and once we'd had enough lubrication, we'd all set out and go caroling. He'd generally wear a hat or something, so he was a bit incognito, but it's very much an essential part of Christmas. The peal of bells on Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, and the wonderful descant melodies of the various carols. That sign me up.
Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on
You're
Behind the
very welcome,
Christmas Hits on iHeartRadio.
Nice to talk to you.
Great to talk to you. Merry
Thanks.
Christmas.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.